Hey, good morning. This is Jonathan Alvin, NycosRPG, and this is Game Master Soapbox. Today, I am not putting my face out there for presentation because it's not about me. This is kind of an important conversation, and I want to talk about something that I believe is indicative of a change in the very nature of play, and in particular of role playing, and I want to talk about it very seriously. There is a issue and at hand in our world today that has completely changed my perspective. And perhaps I'm going to be alienating a percentage of the audience simply by utilizing a specific source. But I want to talk for a moment about a passage that I found in the Bible. And I'm going to do it in the same kind of fashion that Jesus himself did, in that I am going to quote scripture without giving its location, but I am certain that it is familiar enough to viewers, even if they are not of a Christian perspective, even if they're not of a Jewish perspective, that they will appreciate and understand this passage as it is given. But there is a place in the Bible where it is written that we should, as we grow older, put away the childish things and look at them directly, see them as adult. And this concept of putting away the childish nature, I believe we have sort of drifted off of the course, redefined for our own purposes, and basically have put ourselves on a rather dangerous path. And I want to just kind of draw attention to it and perhaps bring us back onto a better track on that. And so as we go, I think you'll probably see where I'm trying to go with this. So we're going to be talking about embracing the childlike nature of man and putting away the childish nature of man, as I think the passage was originally intended. And now I'm not a biblical scholar. I'm not even a layperson scholar. At one point, I did do some local preaching back in my day when I was a much younger and much more haughty and arrogant person. But in this case, what I'm referring to is the idea of putting away the things that we use as tools when we are a child that are no longer necessary, but keeping a hold on that of us that is important because of the very nature of our being. We are intended to be childlike. There are many passages where, for example, Jesus says that you should bring the children unto him and that kind of thing. So we are supposed to be childlike in some fashions, but we definitely need to put away the childish. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. Now, I know this is on Dungeons and Dragons channel, and I probably, as I said, put some people on their back foot on this, but I just want you to take a good listen to what I'm saying. One of the reasons why I've taken my face off of this is that I'm still suffering a bit from my Bell's palsy, and so just watching me talk might be a little painful. So there's also a object lesson in the screen that I am showing you if you are seeing this on video instead of hearing it on a podcast. But the idea here, if you're not able to see the screen, is it's part of my microphone, and it's showing the operations button that turns the microphone on and off, and it doesn't actually turn it on and off. What it does do is mute the microphone, and then the volume knob. And if you can't see very clearly, it's turned all the way up. So I really want this to be a situation where you take a listen to what I have to say. And if you have a comment, I really would like to hear it. I'd love to see any posts in the chat if you are here online while I'm on, or if not, if you would please go ahead and respond in the comments box or even through direct message. It's kind of important that I get feedback on this because I think this is critically important. So, without any ado, we've got 9 points to cover, and so let's get at them, shall we? All right. So, when we say we are going to embrace the childlike, there are certain characteristics of being a mortal being on the planet Earth that are essential, I believe, for our advancement, development, and in fact, our ability to communicate with one another. And the first of one of those is our very nature of being curious. Now, you may already be aware that when we are considering options in any given circumstance. We are looking at uh, the number of options and possibilities that any given thing will provide. And so, in this case, curiosity indicates our desire for possibilities and options. And I believe that curiosity is one of the most rewarding and perhaps most useful asset that we have. The very concept of curiosity stems from our brain's desire to have problems to solve. The adaptability and options that we as human beings develop come directly from our curious nature. We want to know how things work. We want to know why things work. We want to know where things are happening, and every possible characteristic. And so the curiosity is a necessity. But the odd thing about human involvement is that when we are in the process of pursuing an idea and looking at its curiosity value and what we might choose as solutions to it, we actually get more endorphins pumped into our system. We're more uh, affected by the dopamine in our brains and such as we're trying to solve than we are once we have solved. In other words, our body is meant to find answers, actually, but we're designed more importantly to look for answers. And one of the reasons why I believe that we are all so different and why every game master creates his own world and sees its value is that we have created through our curiosity our solutions to the world's issues, and that we accept the openness of alternatives only so long as we are curious. Once we have achieved an answer to any given question, generally speaking, we move on to the next problem because that problem has been solved. Now, this is particularly evidenced in things like just pure epistemological things like: does God exist? Uh, is there a future for mankind? Do we have purpose? Do we have meaning? And chasing those questions, once we come to a conclusion, we conclude. We're done. We are ready to move on to the next question. And I believe that this lack of openness is really what having curiosity is about in the first place. If we had an answer, we wouldn't be looking for answers. So the point here really is that a human being should be constantly open, and it's an odd aperture. It's the opening and closing of the eye, so to speak, of the mind, that you are willing to look for possibilities and accept the probabilities of other answers than the one you originally set upon. So I believe that when it says we should be childlike, we should hold on to that openness and that innate curiosity, because once we conclude something, we shut off certain avenues of potential advances. And I think that's a problem. The next one is similar, and that is we look at the world, and when we see something we've never experienced before, we experience the state of wonder that there are more choices and more options and more possibilities imposed in our worldview in the moments when we are accepting and experiencing these wonders. And I think there's a problem within this one also, in that we should be embracing this wonder, this uh, perception of the real, and we should be looking for how that wonder is defined. In other words, if we pursue a thought experiment or a thought concept a certain distance, we eventually come to what we believe to be an accepted answer. And therein lies the problem, because once you have accepted the answer, then you are automatically shutting down the wonder. Because, again, wonder is that niggling itch to find out, and acceptance is the opposite. It is the closing of that aperture, that closing of that opportunity to see other alternatives. And this is why it's so important to hold on to wonder, to be able to appreciate things that don't fit our acceptance, that don't fit our feeling of it. And I think in role play games, one of the biggest challenges to this is that a rules system, any rules system, if seen as such, becomes a barrier to the very experience of enjoying the game. I mean, I had, when I first started GMing 45, more than 45, almost 50 years ago, players didn't have a well versed knowledge of the realms of fantasy, that there were more, uh, as the saying goes, there were more things in your, I can't remember the phrase. There are more things between heaven and earth than are known in your imagination. I'm misquoting, butchering that phrase. I'm not going to look it up. I'm sure somebody will and put it in the quotes for me, or I can put it in later. But it's a quote from, I believe, Shakespeare. That says that Horatio thinks he understands the world, and there are more things between heaven and earth than are imagined in your philosophies. That's the quote. So when you create your philosophies, you create your perceptions, and you define your acceptance of the universe, you are automatically closing down other possibilities. And I think this is, if there is a kernel of the challenges that we have in this world today, it is that issue that we severally and individually come up with our acceptance of the way the world works. And once we have accepted it and allowed it to be defined, we shut down and close off all other possibilities. And that's a problem. That makes us no longer the adaptable, imaginative, and creative beings that we're intended to be. Now, I use the word intended, and there are people that look at that, and then within my stated uh, assessment as a Christian, they say, well, you've already made up your mind too. And my point here is that, yes, I've perhaps made up my mind, but my perception of the world is still open to other possibilities, which some would say is a weakness of my faith, but I'd argue that it's actually proof of it. But we'll come back to that at a later point. So just realize that wonder is absolutely essential to being a good role player and being a good human being. We have to be able to see things and be amazed all the time. If we ever get to the point where the wonders of the universe are only clearly defined by the equations and mathematics, so to speak, of it, we lose our humanity and our ability to adapt, which is essential to how we came to be. This next point is kind of a parallel to this, but it's referring to our innocence. And when I use that word, of course, it's charged, it's emotionally charged. The idea that we all have about what innocence means shifts as the conditions come up. We believe that innocence is a characteristic of childishness or childlikeness, but this innocence isn't meaning a lack of guilt. It's only referring to a state of being wherein the emphasis upon our existence is not external but internal. We are looking at the things in our lives, and when we hold a position of innocence, we are not exposing ourselves to alternatives that could harm us, but instead we are. There's other words that people use for it. Sometimes they use the word gullibility or incredulity or whatever, and they're referring to innocence being an undereducated position. But in my estimation, when I say that a player in a game or a game master in a game is innocent, he's not free of guilt or free of bias, but what he is accepting of explanations. In other words, if I say, if I make a statement and you say, well, that statement is racist, or that statement is stupid, or that statement is irrelevant, you're drawing a bias and imposing it on what was stated. And this is a counter agent to innocence. In other words, assuming that you know what I meant because of the terms that I used, or assuming that you know who I am because of the actions that I demonstrate. That's a challenge because we are not uh, free from the decision making process. And the challenge is that most times when we have this level of innocence, we then use it as a shield to hide our bias. We say, well, I only feel this way because this is all I've experienced. And that's really an ignorant position because it actually is saying that there's no possibility that you brought bias to the situation, and therefore it inflames and endangers the area because it locks out awareness. And I think this is another essence of our human condition because when we are uh, innocent, we're also very aware of all that is going on around us. And when we close off our minds by a feigned innocence, we are therefore immediately shutting down our awareness. And I think being aware, being able to perceive of the experience around us is critical to being human. We have to be able to be open to the possibilities around us. We have to be able to utilize our imagination to see other possibilities in order for us to communicate in any real way with one another. This concept of an active imagination, an active awareness of possibilities is a byproduct of our curiosity, but it can actually become a burden when we feign innocence and we say, well, we don't know, and whatever. And instead of saying, what are the possibilities and engaging other mindsets or other possibilities, instead we're closing it out and saying that's not a possibility or whatever. We are automatically closing out our own awareness. And that is really a dangerous thing because when we're not being aware, that's when we can be blindsided, when we can be led down the primrose path, so to speak, and taken off into a far land, as the passage might say. So these three, curiosity, wonder, and innocence, are really sort of three facets of the same stone. And I think you'll find that the concept and culture of role playing, whether it be a rules tight system or a rules loose system, either one of them is a danger to our humanity because when we cease being these things, we uh, become vulnerable to coercion, to misdirection, to forms of universalism that are dangerous because we're no longer thinking minds ourselves, but instead we are voice boxes for someone else's agenda. Finally, the fourth one I really want to talk about here that is kind of the anchor, if you will, to this entire concept is the idea of playfulness. And I believe that playfulness ties directly into the concept of the benefit of the doubt. Now, many of you might have not heard this phrase or whitewash it as a platitude, but the idea of the benefit of the doubt is simply not ascribing to another person an intent because we can't possibly know what's going on within their worldview. We can't know what their life experiences have been. And so, playfulness, believe it or not, I believe is the actual antidote to the uniformity of thought and the very thing that kills benefit of the doubt. If we are playful, we can bounce around in our own heads the ideas of what we are and what other people might be thinking. We can actually, in the case of role play in particular, we can actually step into another's shoes and consider the world from their perspective. And I think this really is critical. This is arguably the reason why we have the problems in our world that we have, is that nobody can accept and be playful. I remember when I was a very young child, when I was a kid in school, that the I I was always rather precocious, and I would actually ask questions you're not supposed to ask, so to speak. And when I was, I think, third or fourth grade, I asked the teacher why we had recess. Why did we have to take a break? Because I was a voracious reader and learner at that point, and I just wanted to gather information and continue to fill the pipeline. Well, this this curiosity, wonder, and innocence in my formation actually put me on the wrong side of the next point, because to me at that point, playfulness seemed to be futile. Why go out and hang out on a playground, arguably with people that conversationally you are not equal to either direction, and you're not aware of how they operate, and instead you are holding to trying to hold on to your own view while being in the presence of those that would be in opposition. And that teacher, I believe the name was Ms. Pierpoint. Uh, uh, her statement to me kind of woke me up, and she said, "If you can't play with other people, you'll never be able to work with them." And it was like I was shot in the head. It was like, oh my goodness, that changes everything. If we want to be able to engage with other people and have meaningful discussions, we have to be able to play. We have to be able to consider other options than our own, literally the way you might with picking up an object and turning it around. I remember early schooling also, we had a class that was about it was ostensibly called a physical class, a physicals class. It was a physical education, but in reality, it was actually a class on beats, rhythm, and music. And the idea was you had rubber balls, and you were. I know it sounds very funny. Everybody is now laughing at me and my rubber balls, but the idea was that when you have a ball in your hand and a sound being played over a microphone, you have to coordinate your choice of how to dribble the ball, bounce the ball, with the music, and you have to time it not to uh, simply bounce it and see what rhythm it comes out. Instead, you're trying to coordinate and match up with the sounds you're hearing, so that you're acting as a counterpoint or a emphasis of the very sounds you're getting, and you're having to coordinate them so they happen chronologically at the same time, so that they don't create a cacophony. And that playing around with a rubber ball, and this had to be early, this had to be like second or third grade. The idea of bouncing the ball to a rhythm actually led me to create other rhythms that perhaps were counterpoints or contrapunto or whatever. And they were not, you know, the upbeat, downbeat, you know, not the measure of a time, but instead they were an interpretation of how the sound affected me, and I responded to that affectation by bouncing the ball to convey my emphasis and what I was taking from the music. And that also, again, is a matter of utilizing playfulness to communicate, because in being playful and innovative and interpretive and clever, you're adding to the human experience of other people who might be listening to the same music and making the same sounds. So it's a way of becoming more. We're becoming a unit. We're becoming a culture, a community. And many times, historically, this was done through violence and obligation and even to horrible words like imprisonment, enslavement. There are times when humanity has done this concept of playfulness and communication absolutely incorrectly, and have caused great harm to culture and individuals and such. And so when I'm speaking of playfulness here, again, I'm speaking of the idea of the physical manipulation of an object, moving a object around in your hand to look at all sides and look at all possibilities and all connections that it has. But I'm also talking about it from a mental standpoint of being able to conceive of something that someone else said and mull around and hold that thought in place and then literally work around it because we have things that we can define. And by using, for example, a questioning attitude or again, the curiosity, wonder, and innocent, we can get a more clear picture of what that is. But it's in the playfulness, in the engagement with it, that we gain understanding. And I think this is really critical, that we have gotten away from playfulness. We've done so because we have pigeonholed play in the characters of those things that we think we should put away because they're childish. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes of our time and our culture. And I want to explore that in much more detail in other videos coming forward. And I do want to hear your response. If you like what we're talking about today, make sure you put a like on the video and click the follow button so you'll be able to know when we're creating new videos. Generally, we're on every night at 11 p.m. Pacific, and we cover a broad array of subjects. But if this one interests you, make sure you leave a comment, and we will also be posting this to our YouTube page, which is at NycosRPG. So make sure you look for that as well. Now we're going to turn it around and kind of talk about the stuff that is childish that we should put away. And these are the things that I think we have actually, ironically, held onto because we think that it is the less childlike things, and we get confused when it says put away childish things. When our culture says grow up and be a man and or be a woman or whatever. When culture draws lines and says you must choose your alignment, so to speak. I think that these next points are absolutely critical to realize they are dangerous and actually are the parts that should be put away. The first of these is arrogance and impudence. And I know that those two may not sound the same, but arrogance, the desire to be held as valuable, the look at me phase of our existence, is really one of the more dangerous ones because the universe is a big place. The world that we live in is far, far more than any one of us experiences. And to draw the line and say, no, do it the way I'm doing it, or listen to my rhythm and only bounce your ball to the beat of the drum, so to speak, is a level of arrogance and disregards everyone else around you. And this, you could argue that this is the key to the, they call it venal sin of pride, that when we hold ourselves up and shine the light on ourselves, we are actually trying to insert ourselves into the creation as something greater than what we physically are born to be. Now, having said that, arrogance is also very much a childlike thing, especially when you're dealing with parental units and other adult units that are around you. We all have a desire to be people pleasers, at least to some level. We want to be seen as something valuable, something useful, something that has meaning. And so we take our existence at that face value and think that the way we exist must be the important part. And I think that's really the danger of arrogance, because my observation of the world is only mine. The things that I've run into and the places I've been and the things I've done are very unique. There's not anybody else who's had them fall out in the same particular order. And there are millions and millions of us, right? The world is just full of people. Pardon me. I'm about to sneeze and I'm trying not to. Oh goodness. That was horrible. So the idea of arrogance is to say that my experience is higher priority, or it should be observed. The idea is we should follow a leader that doesn't want to be a leader. We should follow a leader who is only giving his perception and not giving his command. because if we follow anything that is stated as a command, we are giving up a piece of our humanity. And I know right there, I've now done the opposite. All of you that were listening to me and saying, "Oh, he's a Christian and he's got a viewpoint that's going to be uh, monochromatic and singular," I probably just shot that in the foot. But the idea is that arrogance, awareness of our own relative goodness, is a danger to us, and it allows us to be uncaring and unfeeling and unhearing to others, and that is a danger. Children, ostensibly, yes, they say that children are cruel, and the things that children do sometimes don't make any sense, and that's true. But that's because they're all experiencing the world in different times and in different ways, and we have to just put away our arrogance. The idea that there is only one path up a mountain is, arguably, absolutely. I mean, empirically, it's not true. There's 100 different ways to go up a mountain. Some are more probable than others. Some are more creative than others, and some are more dangerous than others. But to choose and say this is the only way to do something is itself a level of uh, ignorance of others, and that's a dangerous thing. Now, this, of course, goes directly now to the second point, and that is we can't be monochromatic in our world. We cannot draw. I mean, when we do, like, for example, somebody listening to this and go, "Oh, well, you're trying to get us to think like you think, and that is monochromatic." And well, but the point here is that I'm wanting you to be playful with it. I'm wanting you to engage with it, ask your questions, engage with the things that I'm saying. When I'm a game master and I'm telling a story, certainly I'm going to give you a monochromatic view. Fundamentally, I'm going to give you the 3D version of where we are, what's going on, who's at play, and all of that. But it's up to the players then to not only accept what I've said, but to play with that. In other words, if I say there's a door at the end of the hall and it appears to be locked and doesn't seem to be passable, it's up to the players to come up with their creative ways of engaging with that door. If they really want to go through it, they're going to find a way. If they want to navigate around it, that's a possibility. And the point here is that monochromism is maybe the statement that I make is monochromatic, but your interception of it, your interaction with it, your very playfulness with it changes it, makes it something that it wasn't before, and therefore brings out more colors, makes it less monochromatic. And I think this is really where we get into problems with precision. I have friends who are game masters that are very much rules as written because they are literally playing the world in the fictional setting as a game. They literally are saying, here are what our parameters are. We don't have any parameters beyond this. And if you're coming to a problem, you must use the solutions that are available. And you're not allowed by the rule system to come up with something that's beyond it. Therefore, if they are playing at a rules as written mechanism, if they are engaging the game by those very limits, they are making the game more precise. Hey, Girduro, nice to have you with us. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Feel free to consider this to be a conversation. I am going through my list of points here, but I'm more than willing to take a second or two and respond. So, as a game master with 50 years of experience, everything to me is a game in a way. We are engaging, therefore, in banter, which is a form of play. You're going to state what you would like to in the comments, and I'm going to respond to it. So thank you again, Gear Duo, for joining me today, and I appreciate the sweet comment. Yes. Alrighty, so we are talking about, again, this is point 6, monochromism and precision. When you have a system that is defined, you utilize the system as long as it helps the other person communicate with you. When you make that monochromistic system the law, you create a level of yay, nice. The issue is that if you make the precision the guiding principle, then you are actually stifling creativity. You're putting up boundaries against creativity, and you are undermining the very concept of playfulness. Now, there are some who would argue with me and say, no, if you're playing chess, you have to move the chess pieces according to the rules of how chess pieces move. And I would agree with that. That's the physical law of the game. Dungeons and Dragons is a physical law system. But having said that, any action that the player takes that is innovative and gets beyond the rule and actually finds ways to work the problem that perhaps makes it a more fun, more exciting, more experiential environment, then I'm all for that. The idea here is that you don't want precision to lock out possibilities. And I know that doesn't seem like a particularly specific point, but the idea here is that a rule system, whichever one, if it is a rule, then it is either it's one of two things. It's either a physical statement of an actual thing, like for example, the law of gravity is not something you can overcome. You can't, I can't not fall down if I lose my balance. I will fall down. That is a physical law. But that's not something that was interposed by a mechanism. Whereas deciding that you must roll initiative at the beginning of the round, and then the initiative must stay in that order for the duration of the game.
Speedy Cash has been lending customers a helping hand since 1997.
Yikes.
But life has gotten much
Hang on a
busier,
second.
and convenience matters.
Pardon me.
So now you
Give
can
me a
choose how
second
you
to shut that
apply.
off.
Call, click, or come
No,
in.
no.
You can call, and we'll help you complete your application over the phone. You can click, skip the phone call,
I
and
don't
go
know how
online.
that got started.
Anytime,
Stop,
any place.
commercial. I don't
Or
allow
come in
you.
and chat face to face with a real person with
refuse.
real solutions. So when you
There. Sorry about that. Yikes. Yeah, I'm such a pro. I'm so on it today, I swear. So hey, welcome to your duo. I'm sure we can probably collaborate in the future too. So if you know how amateur and innovative I am, you would know that even this concept of my camera being focused at my microphone instead of at me is actually an object lesson, and I kind of want to show that over time. All right, so precision, the law as written must be applied, is itself a boundary to knowing the universe, to knowing the world, to knowing the game. And so I balk whenever I hear somebody say, well, you need to be more precise, because the lack of precision gives more room for innovation and creativity and awareness. All the things we talked about before, curiosity, wonder, awareness, these are all things that must be increased when precision is taken down a notch. So I feel that precision is actually, in some ways, antithetical to our human existence. Alrighty, so now we're going to go to the next one. And this next one is rather huge. And that is the concept of absolutism and cancel culture. Our world has become very much, or it's trying to become very much a black and white world where you have to agree with one position or the other, and there are no other alternatives beyond that. This level of absolutism is dangerous because absolutism means that the world's curiosity, wonder, awareness, playfulness are all subject to some limits. And that, I think, is really, really dangerous. The idea that I can choose to disagree with you is fine because we both have our perceptions and we both have our own levels of awareness and our own ability to accept. It's true. We can have two different opinions, but unless we're able to continue the conversation and acknowledge those places where there is crossover, then there is no advancement. A cancel culture, therefore, is by nature a kill culture. I know it sounds bad, but a cancel culture is a kill culture. When you are in a position where someone is not allowed to speak because you don't want them to be heard, is a violation of the very concept of the First Amendment. If we have the right to speak, we should have the right to say anything that isn't going to directly harm others. The whole screaming fire in a theater, yes, that is a dangerous thing when people can flat out lie to cause concern to others. But you don't get rid of the right to speech. You prevent the speech pattern, I guess you would say. So by setting limits in terms of where and when, like for example, just having the ability to shout the word fire, if I'm not in a place where that sound has a specific meaning, yes, there we go. Thank you. Anything that's within the agreed social contract. Yes. The issue is that if you notice that phrase uses three of my comments: agreed, social, contract. So agreement is awareness. We have to be open to what the other person's saying, which means we have to have the ability to be open, right? So we have to be open for an agreement to occur. Social means we have to have at least a grasp on what is being offered in terms of everyone. In other words, if I say a word like honky, or I say a word like cracker, these words don't have a defined meaning until they are put into the social construct of conversation. Even if we're talking about conversation about uh, racial injustices or whatever, using terms like cracker or whitey or whatever is itself a howly, I guess is another one. Those terms are then socially modified terms, right? Because we've now socially put it in that context. And the contract part of it is the agreement. We have to be aware of others, but we have to be able to be playful. And what I mean by playful here is we have to be able to pick up what is said and put it under the lens of the conversation and agree with its use in the conversation. It doesn't mean that I prevent you from using terms like cracker or honky or whitey or whatever. Oh no, no, no! You're right. You're right. You're right. You're right. So thank you, dear duo. It is important to say that you have to separate yourself from this. I actually say that you have to include yourself. Your own statements, your own words have to be put under the same lens. So yeah, if I say throw out cancel culture, I'm not saying to throw out cancel culture because of it being in a video. So yeah, thanks, got you, homie. Nice. Thanks for that gear. All right, yeah. So the idea here is that it's not. I'm not saying that the cancel culture itself is absolutism. What I'm saying is that using absolutism within a culture to cancel culture is actually a kill culture, because what it does is it shuts down the communication process. I hope that makes better sense. I don't want us to be looking at the world and saying we must cancel anybody we don't agree with, because eventually we won't have anything to say. One of the reasons why I put the camera up here right now is I can give you a simple case of cancel culture. If you decided that you didn't like what I was, and that very process of cancel culture deprives you of the playful aspects of my position, because perhaps something I just said would have made more sense and would have put what I have been talking about in a better light. But because I was canceled, in this case muted, then you didn't pick it up. You didn't catch what I was saying. So again, if I go ahead and use cancel culture, and I think that is really what brings us around to the idea of the death of culture if we use cancel culture injudiciously. Does that mean I should let people that are violent speak violence? Well, I'm not a right wing fanatic per se, but Rush Limbaugh used to say something that I thought was particularly clever. He used to say, um, everyone has a right to free speech, but there is nothing out there that gives them a right to be heard. In other words, if I'm shouting fire on a regular basis, then you don't take me to a theater. You don't put me in a position where what I say has an obligation for others to hear. Feel free, Gear Duo. Throw the question at me. Love to hear it. The point that I'm trying to get to is that anything that you say an absolute to is a problem. So, for example, Bertrand Russell, when dealing with postmodernism, argues that because every philosophy created to date has a flaw in it, they are all equally wrong. And therefore, because they are all equally wrong, they are all equally right. The irony is that him saying that is itself a philosophical construct, and therefore his statement that all are wrong puts himself in a light where even his is wrong, and because his uses an absolutism, all, it therefore means that there must be at least one that is truthful, that one that is real, one that is acceptable. And so the idea that we cannot or we should not listen to another's opinion is absolutely ineffective, and the very idea of an absolute. I mean, I remember seeing a bumper sticker once that I thought was really, really clever. It said, kill all extremists. And at face value, you go, yeah, the people that are way to the left, way to the right, way to the bottom, way to the top, they probably should be downplayed. But wait a minute, that's an extreme view. If it's an extreme view, then it should be itself considered to be an extremist view, and therefore the person holding that view would be signing himself up for elimination by the argument. So, yeah, feel free, Gear Duo, to drop your question. I'd love to hear what you got to say before I go on to this next one. What is the practical application at my game table for not allowing certain things to be shared in that space? Okay, practical application. Okay. What is the practical application at your game table for not allowing certain things to be shared in that space? Well, there are social mores. So any comments of violence towards other people, etc., are suspect. Any broadcast of deviancy in terms of interfering with other beings and such are anathema. As far as practical application, first of all, players, I suppose,